Hey, everybody. Tina, how am I supposed to follow that? I am not a quiet leader. I am very loud, so I have some lessons to learn from you. Hey, everybody. I'm Andy. Um, I use he/him pronouns. I'm a content designer. I live in the sister nation of the left coast, California. We're just gonna. They put all the Americans at the end. What was that? What was that about? So I work at Glean. It's a startup that makes AI tools for work. I'm also, as Rachel mentioned, the co-author of Writing is Designing. I wrote with Michael Metz back in 2020. I can't believe it's been more than 5 years since we published that. This just seems really recently. In the past, I worked at Microsoft, Cruise, Facebook. I'm not going to call it Meta, but perhaps most notably for this talk, I was at Adobe for 6 years building a design practice there. So I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today comes from that. But first, I just want to acknowledge, I want to take a second to recognize the many thousands of folks in California, where I live, and across the US who are risking their lives by protesting immigration policies in the US, which is brutal and cruel, and it is scary. So I'm not, just something that happened, just starting last week, and I was like, Rachel, can I put a slide in real quick? So thank you for letting me do that. They're brave in ways that I'm not, and just in many ways, if you're watching this and you've taken action in these demonstrations, thank you so much. That's really needed right now. So back to the show. 3 years ago on this very stage, it was virtual because 2022, I shared what it was like to step into people management for the first time. The fear, the responsibility, and the hope of doing it well. Today, I'm going to kind of go full circle, and I'm going to talk about what it's like to step out. Before we do that, I thought it might be fun to explore some alternate titles for this talk, because this is a little dry. This is some of the personal stories I'm telling here. So before we dig in, let's explore some alternatives. This is a pretty good one. It's pretty aspirational. This one is pretty accurate as well, at least for me. But let's be honest, this is really what's happening right now. This is the most accurate. So just feeling upward. Anyhow, I want to start off with a clip from that 2022 Tempo talk, just about how becoming a manager. I want to start off by giving a history. I started off in this talk by giving a history of the concept of emotional labor, its roots in professions like airline attendants and social work, and how it's part of the job of people managers to acknowledge and manage emotions as it is to manage performance. So let's make sure this works. Sometimes your team will come to you with a bubbling over of positive emotion, the elation of shipping something they worked hard on, or even a particularly good research session where they learned a lot. It's a pleasure to support them and uplift them in their joy in that case. But much of the time, you need to help your team manage in more difficult emotions. I've had several instances of somebody on our team break down and cry in a one-on-one with me after a meeting that went badly or a frustrating experience with a stakeholder. It's tough. Your job is, at that point, to acknowledge and validate their feelings. But you're not a therapist, right? Of course not. It's important to find the right balance between emotional honesty and emotional management. You want to be authentic and transparent, but you also want to make sure that you don't project your own cynicisms, negativity, or anxieties on your team, because they're probably finely attuned to that. And to be effective here, to take on the emotional labor of managing your team, you need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of yourself before you can take care of your team. So spoiler, I did not take my own advice. As the pandemic wore on and the horrors in the world mounted up and compounded, I was really burning out, personally and professionally. I thought I was being strong and stoic. My wife and I bought a house. I had just passed my 5-year mark at my job. Things were good, right? What right did I have to feel bad? There's a point after a couple of one-on-ones where folks on my team were unloading, just like I talked about in that clip, venting about a frustrating experience, fear over uncertainty in tech, in the world, everywhere. I remember hanging up from that call and just breaking down. Turns out my own emotional labor cup was already at the brim, and I just couldn't take it on anymore. It had already been like that for a while. Looking back, I realized how much of my own life was already at the brink of collapse. My marriage, a house in San Francisco that I just bought, my career. I was neglecting myself, my partner, my job, my team, and eventually the dam broke. Within 3 months, she was my ex. She moved back to Indiana, where we were both from, and in a turn of events that I didn't see coming, but in retrospect, I actually should have, I was fired from my job. I felt like my identity was ripped away from me. All these things I was so proud of that I talked about in my last Tempo talk, about building relationships, taking on the emotional labor of my team, understanding my own strengths and weaknesses, they all failed. I was not leading by example. I was not exhibiting braver leadership. And I'm surprised, Rachel, that you let me talk at this conference this year. I let myself down, my team, and countless friends and colleagues. It was a dark and hard time. I spent some time doing what I needed to do. I needed to sell a house, separating a collection of stuff that had accumulated after a 17-year marriage, move my ex's stuff across the country, and my stuff into a new place. Eventually, I was able to find some opportunity in this new reality. Namely, I started looking for IC roles. You see, I was already trying to get back into an IC role at Adobe, but on my team, there was just no room for me to do so. We had a number of very senior, well-qualified ICs with no management aspirations, so we were full up. After interviewing at a few places, I ended up with 2 offers on the table. 2023 wasn't that long ago, but it was a much different time. One was to lead a content design team of 8 at a very large, recognizable brand, and one was a staff-level IC at a much smaller company, but with a more interesting product team and folks I had worked with before and really admired. The first job was a great opportunity and seemed like it would be the next logical move in my career, and the pay was lucrative. But something didn't feel right. My girlfriend, Erica, who was a new relationship at the time, knew my backstory and was the one who pointed out to me that wasn't this what burnt you out in the first place? She was right. So I took that IC role, and thus I restarted my IC career. Since then, I've been laid off twice within a year because 2023, 24, 25, and earlier this year, I found a place that I really feel good about. In that time, I've learned a bit after 6 years away from the IC life. And through all this, I've heard from so many content design leaders out there who are thinking about going back into an IC role. It feels fresher. It feels less complicated. I'm here to tell you that that's true, but it's also not so true. So for those folks who might be kind of like thinking about that move, this is for you. So in true Think Boy fashion, I came up with a list of 5 things that I've learned. This time it's some big takeaways from going back into an IC role for all my manager friends who are thinking about it, or for ICs who are thinking about going into management, honestly. So let's dig into some of these. First thing, the thing that I think is on everybody's mind, one of the hardest feelings to share when you go from being a manager to being an IC is that you've slipped, lost some altitude, that you've stepped down instead of moving forward. This first occurred to me when I was still at Adobe. I was having conversations with my boss about being promoted to a director. It was clearly the next step in my journey, and in discussions with my boss, I started to realize, at least in that role, in that place, being a director was just being a super manager. I was still managing people, but also budgets, and the stakes are higher, yay. For the first time, I questioned that promotion. It was clearly the next step, but also, I wasn't sure I wanted to take it. I loved everything about building a team, setting up practice, and helping others grow in their careers. But I realized how draining it was to be in charge of promotions, performance reviews, goal setting and tracking, and the administrative overhead. I also saw what was happening to my own boss. No, Obama was not my boss, but I'm not going to show you a picture of him side by side of the manager who fired me. He had gone from managing ICs to managing mostly other directors. And with every promotion, his scope widened and his world got more abstract. I watched his work slowly shift from craft and collaboration to calendars and crisis control. I had and still have nothing but respect for him. But I wondered, is this really what I'm climbing toward? That was a very Carrie Bradshaw line. I just realized as I said it right now. For me, the ambition was still there, but just like that, now I was sitting next to a new feeling, doubt. And when I started job searching, I wasn't chasing a grand reinvention. I was just trying to find a path forward, any path forward that didn't feel like more of the same. By the way, the only reason I used this photo was this man's face looks so unhinged. What acting? What surprised me was that every time I looked at another management role, I felt a pit in my stomach. I knew where that path led, and I wasn't sure I had it in me to walk that again. So when I saw an IC role that was interesting, not safer, not easier, but different, I let myself consider it. And eventually I took it, not because I had a 5-year plan, but because something in me whispered, this could be better, this could be different. Looking back now, I see it more clearly. Stepping sideways wasn't part of any master plan. It was survival, but it really was a turning point. This working? There we go. The thing that I realized I missed, and the thing that I really want to lean in on, was craft. I missed that. I missed the building, the writing, the collaborating, the little UX puzzles to solve, the magic of finding the right phrase at the right moment. I had an opportunity to reconnect with my craft. That's what really pulled me forward. However, it's worth noting that as excited as you may be to do the same, it'll take some time to get the hang of it. It'll be a little rusty. You'll probably be a little bit rusty when you jump back into IC work again. I remember when I started my new role at Cruise and clicked into a Figma file for the first time, I felt like a tourist. The last thing I'd made in Figma, well, Adobe XD, RIP, was an org chart mapping which content designers covered which parts of the product. I'm sure many people have made that same chart. And suddenly here I was, poking around in an actual product interface. I was terrified that I'd break something. I hovered over components like they might bite me. So I started small. One of the first projects I took on to get my feet wet was an audit of the push notifications we sent out to customers during autonomous rides. It's a robotaxi company. Things like, your car has arrived, we're rerouting, trip complete, things like that. Those messages were short and transactional, but I could see how much pressure was on them to be clear and calm and timely, especially for driverless cars, which folks were fairly uneasy with. So I started to rewrite, I started to iterate, I explored edge cases. I took that work to content crit, and I got feedback. And slowly, I felt something I haven't felt in years. I was making something I could point to in a portfolio, something I could ship. That was a great feeling. It's something I missed. But it took time. I didn't jump in with perfect instincts or fast hands. I had to relearn the tool and to rebuild my writing muscle. I had to remind myself what good looked like and kind of how to reach that again. What helped was that I didn't come back empty-handed. I had a ton of strategies from management that I could use at IC. I knew how to ask questions that surfaced clarity before anybody else realized we were confused. I could mentor others on how to navigate difficult stakeholders. I had lots of little frameworks and strategies at my disposal for how to do all sorts of things, like writing for onboarding, error states, difficult situations, things like that. I wasn't the fastest IC on the team, but I tried to be really thoughtful and kind, my values. I was trying to be helpful where I could and build trust with my team. And even before I was fully back in the groove, before I felt sharp in Figma or confident in a content crit, I noticed something surprising. People were already coming to me with questions. That's when I realized you don't have to be somebody's manager to be their mentor. You don't have to have a reporting line or a skip level IC or skip level one-on-one. You just need to show up generously with your time, with your feedback, with your experience. And honestly, some of the most impactful mentorship I've offered in the past couple of years didn't come from a formal role or from my authority or higher level in an org chart. It came from hallway conversations, quick one-on-one chats, Slack threads like this one that I definitely didn't just make up for this talk. Comments left with care. This is something I was already thinking about before stepping into an IC role. So flashback to 2022, I was attending the Button conference in Seattle, their one and only in-person Button, where I was moderating a panel about, ironically, burnout. I was in the midst of feeling miserable as my life was falling apart. Because I was an author of a book that these attendees were the exact audience for, I had a certain level of visibility that I didn't want at that point. I wanted to be invisible. Sorry, I thought that timing was a little sooner than that. My clicker is not working. There it goes. There's a talk that made me sit up and pay attention. Mike Restiano, who was then a manager at Instacart and is now the head of content design at Welfle, gave a talk, How to Break into Management Without Breaking Yourself or Others. That was the talk that I wish I had given earlier that year at Tempo. The part of his talk that I couldn't stop thinking about was where he listed some statements on the screen and made a bit of a Cosmo quiz. Which set of statements do you identify with the most? If it's the one on the left, you might be a good fit for management. If on the right, maybe an IC. Now, I didn't fit neatly into the set on the right, but especially at that time, they resonated with me so much. It was a wake-up call. Maybe I wasn't meant to be a manager, but I still loved working with ICs, especially folks who are still excited about content design and want to grow. They still look up to me and ask for advice. He went on to talk about mentorship. He said, mentoring is another great opportunity to explore. What is mentoring? In short, is there another individual contributor that you can form a knowledge-sharing relationship with without actively being their boss? I felt like he was speaking directly to me. That's what I wanted. I wanted to help people grow in their careers without having power over them, and to learn from them myself. And less than a year later, I realized I could put that into practice. I was on a small but very dynamic team of 6 content designers at Cruise. And while I felt like I was relearning how to walk, I still had perspectives that I could offer and values that I could provide. There were a few ways I found to mentor some of my more junior teammates. And spoiler, that list looked like a lot like the list you saw earlier about how I learned to help myself as an IC. Right? You can get them unstuck in crits or one-on-one chats by helping them through their thinking. You can help them deal with hard stakeholders by talking them through those stakeholders' motivations and incentives and reading the room. You can break out those same strategies and frameworks you've collected over the years that might be relevant, because they'll still be relevant. I can't tell you how much this was a balm for my soul. Even though I was still relearning the tools, I realized mentoring others helped me rebuild confidence in my own judgment. It reminded me that I wasn't starting over, that I was still providing value. Another advantage that you have as an IC, once you find your confidence again, is that you know how the sausage is made. I really hate that metaphor, but it's apt, so bear with me. Also apologize for this photo. Vegetarian, sorry. This is a short one, but still useful. As a former manager, you know how it works, right? Headcount planning, performance review calibration, recruiting, leveling, the works. You've seen how the promo packets get read. You've written the career leveling docs outlining exactly what leadership wants to see next. You know what makes work legible to leadership and what gets overlooked. Now, as an IC, that's a huge advantage. I felt like this gave me a tighter rapport with my manager. We could have a more honest, candid conversation. Let's switch metaphors a bit. I got a closer look behind the curtain. And by the way, somebody used this exact slide earlier. Was that you, Elizabeth? I think so. Yeah, that's funny. Different metaphor, but also still very apt. So I got a closer look behind the curtain, and that trust and candor really let me shape my career path more effectively. I knew what my boss and her boss were probably looking for from me, which made it easier to write my own goals and OKRs. So yes, as a former manager, you bring all kinds of behind-the-scenes knowledge that helps you operate more strategically as an IC. But it's not just about knowing how the machine works. It's how you show up in the room, how you support your team, how you hold the bar and help others reach it. Because even without a team to manage, you're still a leader. I worked in a lot of places and hang out in a lot of communities that conflate manager with leader. And one of the things that I love about Tempo is that this community doesn't really do that. A lot of us are managers, directors, etc., but a lot of us aren't. I think a lot about my friend Jane Ruffino, who gave a talk at this very conference, who absolutely is a leader in this space, although she'll tell you she doesn't identify as one. And I realize that you need to be anointed as a leader, so I thereby appoint you a leader, Jane. She's one of the best system thinkers I know and a very generous sharer, and brings a deeply human, empathetic lens to everything she touches. She's thoughtful and kind, and she shows up as a leader every day without ever needing to manage a team. And I am in a bitchy group chat with her. And some of us, I'm going to point out another name, Jonathan Coleman, has been back and forth between a manager and IC a few different times. So he reminds me that this career path is not a straight line. And when I felt like I was taking a huge career blow, I was reminded that however he shows up at whatever organization he's at, as a manager or as an IC, he's done so with grace and care and elegance. And there are folks like Shannon Leahy and Candy Williams. Shannon's in the group chat, hey Shannon, or the stream, who are consistently caring people managers and who I look up to when I was managing people. And heck, I still look up to them because they're leaders who are somehow business savvy, user-centric, and kind and empathetic people. Am I done with people management? I don't know. Right now I'm working at a startup where I'm the sole content designer. But as Glean grows, maybe my team will too. I am managing an intern right now. I do know that if I step back into management, I'm going to approach it differently. Maybe that's a whole other talk about growing a team mindfully and strategically and sustainably. I don't think I can go back to having 12 direct reports. So let me end here, both as a reminder to myself and as encouragement to you. Whether you're leading a team or leading through your craft, please give yourself the same care and thoughtfulness you offer to others, because that's also leadership. Thank you very much.